Apulia in. So the G7. Okay. So the G7 summit is kicking off in Italy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expected to is flying there. He's going to meet with his top counterparts from around the world, including Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. We've got our wonderful boss and foreign affairs editor at India Today, Geeta Mohan, on the ground there. So what can you tell us about what's going on at the G7? What is the sense of the room? What is the flavor of the conversation there in Italy right now?
Well, firstly, to begin with, I'll give you a ground report, Shashank, by tomorrow, but because we were really rushing after landing. But
Sure.
The security over here, in terms of where the venue of the summit is absolutely it's been turned into a fort, and nobody can enter, exit. It's rather difficult. So
Right.
we ourselves are not allowed to go to the city of Fasano, but we are here in Bari, 60 kilometers away, which is where the media center is. I'll just give you a look and feel of the media center.
Absolutely.
This is how the media center looks. This is where all of them sit. We have our tables, charging stations, people and journalists from across the world,
right?
Particularly the G7 nations, but also the invited countries. There you have the counters where you can go and seek for help and assistance. So a lot of them over here, a lot of volunteers over here helping us also. But the fact is that this is a very nice, quaint city where the G7 summit International Media Center is, and it's in the city of Fasano where the main venue is, where the leaders are going to land. But before that, Shashank, the Indian Premier has just left. He just departed maybe 20 minutes ago, and he, in his the departure statement, he has he's written about the invitation by Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and that he will be traveling to the Apulia region, which is where the Fasano city is,
right?
For the G7 outreach summit. As India is a guest country, we can only be part of the outreach sessions, not the main leadership sessions, and so he's going to attend that. He also says that I'm glad that my first visit in the third consecutive term is to Italy for the G7 summit.
Right.
I warmly recall my visit to Italy for the G20 summit in 2021. Prime Minister Meloni's 2 visits to India last year were instrumental in infusing momentum and depth in our bilateral agenda. We remain committed to consolidate the India-Italy strategic partnership and bolster cooperation in the Indo-Pacific and Mediterranean regions.
Right.
He also speaks about the sessions that his focus would be on artificial intelligence, energy, Africa, and the Mediterranean. It will be an opportunity to bring greater synergy between outcomes of the G20 summit held under India's presidency and the forthcoming G7 summit, which is being held under France's presidency, to deliberate on issues which are crucial for Global South. So clearly the message over here, like we were discussing earlier, that Prime Minister Modi's focus is going to be not just to represent India, but to represent the Global South. That's the strong, big message that he will be coming to Italy with. He'll be landing here in the wee hours of the intervening night between today and tomorrow. And the message comes at a time when there are 2 big conflicts that the world is grappling with. One is the Russia-Ukraine war, the other is the Israel-Hamas war, Shashank. Right. So it is going to be very, very interesting to see what India is going to put forth. He comes as a leader of the coalition government with the 3rd term under his name. None other than Prime Minister Nehru achieved this huge I mean, it is a huge achievement for any leader in India.
Right.
So he comes strong, but he also comes knowing very well that there's a lot of expectation from India as to what India has to deliver.
Right.
Having said that, there's one big confirmation that we have. We do know that Prime Minister is going to hold a bilateral meeting with his Italian counterpart, Giorgia Meloni. We've seen all that happens every time the 2 leaders meet, even if it's on the sidelines or even if it's a brief chit-chat. So let's see what the 2 sides are planning for the meeting this time around. Is it going to have some colorful, light flavor to the meeting as well, apart from the fact that there are going to be very substantive talks between the 2 sides? I spoke with the Italian ambassador, which we should be putting out in some time, and we do have the link of the interview on our channel.
Right.
So log on, watch that interview. It's an important one. He talks about how the two countries are going to discuss strategic cooperation, but there's a very important component of mobility, and that will offer a lot of jobs to Indians. They are increasing the cap for jobs for Indians who want to go to Italy and work. So that's a very important aspect that the two sides will be talking about and discussing. And apart from that, there will be some increase in the kind of enhancement that they want to see in the partnership between the two countries, Shashank.
Right. If I could ask you, you were at the G20 summit as well. You're at the G7 now. You talked about this summit sort of following up for India on some of the priorities of the G20, especially when it comes to the global south. What are the parallels what are the parallels that you see between the G7 and the G20? Are there any? What's the energy in the room? What do you think the policy conversations are going to be like? Are there any parallels? Any similarities?
Well, firstly, there are going to be a lot of similar conversations because the G7 is present in the G20, and that focus does not get diluted. But what is important over here is representation. G20 is more representative of the world, Shashank, and G7 is lesser. And that's the reason why it always requires or now sees the need to have invitee nations. And India has been part of this invitee nations for the past now 5 years. And it seems like it is going to continue for many more years to come. This is the 11th time that India is represented at the G7. There were 10 previous one, of which a substantial number, about 6, I suppose, were by Prime Minister Mohan Singh. And now we're looking at Prime Minister Modi carrying on that tradition of being invited here at the G7, albeit now what we're seeing is consecutive invitations for India. So that's a very important one, that there are consecutive invitations for India. India is that much more important. But going back to what you were asking, the conversations over here will focus on a few very important agendas. Now, we do know, Shashank, you and I, how and why the smaller group of developed nations came about.
Right.
Russia indeed was part of this grouping. It was called the G8 after the Crimea 2014 conflict between Ukraine and Russia and the takeover of Crimea. Russia was ousted from the grouping. But primarily, if you look at the larger concept, it has to do with how they're looking at a growing and a threatening China.
Right.
So China certainly is a very important part of the conversation that takes place amongst this grouping, the G7. And with the other countries now who are participating, I suppose they will be looking at not just the threat or the concerns that they have in terms of assertion, aggression, so on and so forth, but also solutions. And India might not be part of the problem, but it certainly today is part of the solution.
Right.
So
if I may ask,
looking at supply chains.
Right.
Yeah.
If I may ask, a lot of people are going to ask this question, right? And you alluded to it very rightly. This idea that, the G7 is a Western club of just, some of the most powerful countries economically in the world. It's outmoded. It's been around 50 years. Still has more or less the same countries. So when Indians look at something like the G7, they're saying, look, why does the Prime Minister need to go there? What exactly is he going to be able to achieve? What does he hope to achieve for India? What is India going to get out of it? If I may put it slightly more bluntly, what do you think is going to happen that way?
So let me put that. Let me put a counter question, Shashank, to your question. Why do you think the G7 is inviting India? Why do you think the G7 invited India last year or the year before last? Instead of us looking at why is India going, the question now should be reversed, because that's how the world is today.
Right.
It is reversing. It's tilting towards India. It is a little topsy-turvy, and in which India certainly looks like it's going to play a very important role. So the question is, why is the world looking at India and looking to India? India's participation over here, should there have been problems with countries, there have been a situation where India had to really take a position and choose, India might not have come. But the fact that India is wanted and India is invited, India decides to come, is because of the position it has taken. Russia is not in the room, but India has not left Russia's side.
Right.
China is not in the room, and India does have a very difficult relationship with China, but it continues to engage. We are still China is still our largest trading partner. So no matter what is being said publicly, the fact is that China is indeed an important country for India too.
Right.
So when India is in the room with all these countries that we call a Western bloc, maybe looking more harshly towards Russia, and certainly as a threat and competition when they're looking to China. India is that route because of the position it is holding. That nobody today can tell India that should you want to be in this room, you will have to sever ties with such and such country or such and such country. Despite not severing ties, India has been invited. So we will surely go if you're invited. The question should be reversed. Why is it that the G7 is inviting us? It is because of the position now that India has made for itself on the global stage.
Right. If I may ask you another question, just borrowing from what the Prime Minister was saying in his own statement, he talked a lot about the bilateral relationship with Italy, the fact that there's been an invitation from Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of Italy. What is your flavor? What is your sense of the bilateral relationship? How India is going to be seen there? What this is going to mean for India's relationship with Italy? The Prime Minister, of course, laid out a very positive vision for what he wants to see happen with this partnership. So, and of course, we're also aware of the enormous popular interest in the Jodi between Modi and Meloni. So, could you give us a sense, the flavor of what's happening in the bilateral relationship? Why is there so much excitement? What do you see it reflected there at the G7?
Well, I think it will be. I think the kind of camaraderie, the kind of bonhomie, if I may say so, between the two leaders that we've seen in the past, Shashank, is something that everybody now almost looks forward to. The moment Prime Minister took off, when he's saying, "Okay, so what's going to happen between Prime Minister Modi and Meloni?" So a private, a personal conversation, touch, photograph, a selfie does make a huge difference in how conversations then move around the two leaders every time they meet, which is expected this time around also. We do not know exactly what the two sides are planning. But in terms of the conversation and the historic ties between the two countries itself, Italy and India have seen their own ups and downs. There has been the massive Augusta Westland chopper scam controversies. And then we had the Italian Marines controversy with Kerala and the Kerala government still till not so long ago, talking about how is India continuing ties in a certain way, and Italian Marines have been allowed to leave, so on and so forth. So that controversy was put to rest, and now it seems like they have started a new chapter, and that chapter is absolutely filled with a lot of hopes and aspirations of how to take the two countries forward.
Right.
Yeah, the Italian Premier Shashank will be meeting Prime Minister Modi and will be actually hosting the G7 on a real high. Look at her numbers, look at Italy's numbers at the European Union elections.
Right.
She certainly is the kingmaker here within the EU, and certainly seems like it's on that high that she's coming to this world stage of G7 leaders and plus. And then she will be meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In terms of the historic ties that we're talking about, we are looking at a lot of conversations on various fronts, whether it's defense, technology, AI, people to people contact. Culture is a very important component of India-Italy ties. Again, we do not know, and I don't know how to rope that in, but there is a problem in Europe today, as has been a case in US and Canada and UK. We are seeing growing instances of pro-Khalistani elements in Italy as well.
Absolutely.
You and I were reporting just yesterday of Mahatma Gandhi's bust having been vandalized.
Right.
And that's a serious matter. It will happen just ahead of Prime Minister's visit. So they're quite mobilized, they are quite organized, and we do not know how the Italian authorities are going to now look at containing this problem, which is a huge concern for India.
Right. And if I could ask you another question, we've talked about things that would, things that are, positive meetings, positive vision. Two countries, though, going to be there with whom India has not necessarily had the best relationship for the last couple of years. There's, of course, Canada with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, of course, expected to be in attendance, and President Erdogan of Turkey, also expected to be in attendance. Of course, President Erdogan and Prime Minister Modi had met in 2022, but there's Canada and there's Turkey. Do you foresee Prime Minister Modi using this occasion to perhaps reach out to both these countries as well and sort of see whether there's any common ground, any room for improvement in the relationship?
Shashank, you'll have to repeat yourself. I just couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry, let me say that again. I was saying that there are two other countries that are also going to be there at the G7. There is, of course, Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is expected to be there. There is Turkey, represented by President Erdogan. So my question to you is, do you see Prime Minister Modi using this occasion at the G7 to try to see if there's any common ground with these countries? India has not had a very good relationship, very stable relationship with these countries over the last couple of years. Do you think that the Prime Minister is going to use this opportunity to improve these relationships?
Well, Shashank, your guess is as good as mine. We know that there are going to be some confirmed conversations. We're calling them encounters or meetings that are likely, apart from the confirmed one, which is with the Italian Premier. Biden, Macron, Scholz, they all fall on that list, in that list. But really do not know whether if there's going to be confirmation of a meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau, given the difficult relationship that the two sides have shared in the recent past. Even if there's a chance meeting, a brief meeting between the two leaders, in all probability it will, surround around the concerns on Khalistan. He's going to elections. It is his vote bank too, as much as it was of the other side. So the Trudeau administration will be clear on these concerns, and I suppose Prime Minister Modi will respond on what India has done, and so far the fact that Canada has actually not provided, according to Indian authorities, actually not provided any strong, credible evidence for them to start pursuing the case. We also know that Erdogan is going to be here, but no confirmation on if there's going to be a meeting, although the two did meet on the sidelines of the G20 as well last year.
I understand. And then I guess simply to wrap up, I must ask, you've laid out for us, what the policy priorities are going to be, what the Prime Minister is hoping to do. If I could ask you for a little explanation on how is the day tomorrow going to pan out, what exactly is going to happen, so that our viewers know exactly what to catch, what the big events are that they need to pay attention as the Indian Prime Minister heads to Italy.
Well, the G7 summit meeting has already kicked off. There are going to be leadership conversations that are going to take place in some time from now. We will see leadership statements come out. The leadership sessions will begin. And tomorrow is the outreach sessions where the guest countries are going to participate: climate change, artificial intelligence, energy, Africa. These are major parts. And it's interesting that they have Africa as a major part and component of their outreach sessions, because Shashank, it was at the G20 that African Union actually was included as a member of the grouping. Before that, the focus, the energy that is required to bring Africa out of the kind of problems Africa as a continent has been facing was not talked about in the manner in which it should have been. And this time around, after AU being included at the G20 as a G20 member, we're looking at Africa being a major part of the conversation during the outreach session. So the guest countries are going to be part of the outreach session. There are going to be some important open sessions, then closed door sessions amongst the G7 leaders, which will lead to the outcome document on either late evening tomorrow or early next day. So that's how the day is going to pan out in terms of sessions and in terms of an outcome document. And we'll have to see in the outcome document how strongly are the words on Israel-Hamas war going to be put forth, because we're looking at a Western bloc over here with so many guest countries coming, and so many of them having already raised their concerns with regards to what's happening in Gaza. It's almost similar to, can't be exactly the same, but almost similar to how the negotiations took place on Russia-Ukraine in the G20 document, not just in India, but also the year before in Bali. There was a lot of to and fro that happened before they could actually agree upon a statement, a draft text for the Russia-Ukraine paragraph. In this case, we'll have to see what's that text for Israel-Hamas war going to look like. Is there going to be a condemnation of the October 7th attacks and just a mere concern raised on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza? Or will there be an important call by the G7 leaders and the need to really go ahead and stop what is happening in Gaza, a complete ceasefire? I know that there is certainly going to be references to the hostages and the fact that they need to be they need to be released at the earliest.
Understood.
So a lot of conversations. Let's see what happens in the final outcome document, what the text of Israel-Hamas war is going to look like.
Understood. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure you're extremely busy on the ground there in Italy. I'm sure you'll continue to bring us all the latest updates, especially as the day evolves tomorrow and the Prime Minister sort of works through his very packed schedule, meeting, of course, his counterparts, some of the most powerful leaders in the world. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for watching, viewers, here at India Today Global.